All right, hello everyone. Hello, welcome to Canary Live Boston. All right. We have an incredible crowd here tonight. Sold out show. Our second sold out Canary Live. We did one in Boston 6 months ago. Or I'm sorry, in New York. We're in Boston tonight. 6 months ago that sold out, so we appreciate the support. I'm Nicholas Rinaldi, General Manager at Canary. And like I said, we're thrilled to be here with our partners from Postscript Media and our host, Greentown Labs. Thank you to Jill and Kelly and the team for hosting us. We wouldn't be able to do it here tonight. So let's, round of applause for Greentown. So not only is this a special day because it's our Canary Lab Boston, which is very close to our heart, but it's also Canary's birthday. We started 2 years ago today. And, we set out with ambitious goals. We wanted to be the newsroom of record to cover solutions to the climate crisis, cover the energy transition. We have a great team of reporters. You'll be hearing from one of them tonight, Maria Virginia Olano. So we're celebrating our birthday, and if you got our newsletter this morning, well, first off, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, come on, right? canarymedia.com, please subscribe. But if you got the newsletter, you saw we're kicking off our spring donation drive. We are a nonprofit newsroom. We rely partly on the donations of our readers and our friends and those who support us to fuel our newsroom and help us thrive. So you'll notice throughout the space tonight, we have some QR codes here on the right side, by the bar, at the entrance. If you scan those, it will take you to the donation page. Anything that you can give to show your support, to signal that this type of journalism is important to you, means a lot to us, and it helps us ramp up our coverage of everything from IRA implementation to environmental justice in frontline communities that are dealing with fossil fuels. So please keep that in mind, and we'd appreciate your support if you can. Before we get started tonight, well, we have a great lineup. Back on the stage, maybe after a few years, I don't know, but Steve and Lacey will be up first with the carbon copy panel, and you'll be hearing from Steven in a minute. We'll then go into networking break, and we will have our second Canary panel moderated by Maria Virginia Olano with a really esteemed set of journalists joining that panel. So before we start, I do want to recognize our sponsors as well tonight, because without them, this would not have happened. Nexamp. You'll be hearing from Keith from Nexamp shortly. I know there's a lot of Nexamp folks in the house tonight. I thought I heard a couple shout outs in the back. There we go. Sense, thank you very much. Boston Metal, Mass CEC, and Greentown, obviously. So without further ado, we'll kick off the night, and I'll invite Steven to the stage.
Ooh. Hey everybody, thanks for taking the time. I don't know how to reduce, there we go, thank you. We are so grateful that everyone came out and took time out of their evening to come watch the show and watch these panels. Before we actually start the entertainment, I wanted to give you a little overview of the run of show, talk a little bit about what we're doing with the podcast and Postscript Media and our partnership with Canary Media, and then I'll bring Keith from Nexamp on to say a few words, and then we will begin the show. So we are going to be recording these sessions tonight. The opening session of Carbon Copy is it's a live recorded podcast, so you all are doing a wonderful job being nice and quiet, and we know that people want to network and talk to each other, so if you do maybe want to talk to someone, try to find a corner, but we would appreciate it if you tried not to talk during the shows, because these mics will pick up chatter, and we very much encourage you to interact with the show. So if you hear something that you like, feel free to cheer. If you hear something you don't like, feel free to jeer. And we just want to hear from you as part of the crowd, and we will be taking some listener questions as well. So if you've got something creative or interesting to say, please feel free to step up. We'll take a few questions. And then please keep those questions short as well. So a little bit about Postscript Media before we get started. We're a production team. We are a team of 10 producers making shows at the intersection of climate change, and other areas, news, business, culture, tech, food, supply chains, fashion. And we are thinking about how to tell the climate story for people who are moving money, making decisions, building companies, starting their careers, in all these different areas where we can tell the climate sustainability story. And so our philosophy is that you can make this a hopeful, inspiring story by telling solutions at these areas where people are making decisions. And so that is the spirit with which we are building the audio programming. And we're pleased to partner with Canary Media as well. We produced 2 of the shows in partnership with them, and we have a great relationship. So we're just really grateful that you're all here. We're super excited to start the show. And I'm going to bring Keith from Nexamp up to say a few words, and then we will get the party started. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for adjusting the mic. I wasn't sure how I was going to do that when I got up here anyway. Good evening. My name is Keith Hevenar. I am, as Stephen said, with Nexamp. We are based right here in Boston, downtown Boston. We're a team of about 425 or so professionals who are passionately pursuing the decarbonization of the U.S. and our energy grid through our projects that include things like community solar, energy storage, a number of decarbonization solutions that we're working on and rolling out. We have a portfolio of about almost a gigawatt of operational or nearing completion assets, generating assets right now, another couple of gigawatts in the pipeline. So we're making good progress, but we're just honored to be here to be sponsoring this event tonight, and grateful to Canary Media and Greentown Labs. We just feel like it's really important that as an industry and as a society, we have these conversations about the issues that we're facing and the challenges that we're facing, and bring together some of the smartest people to discuss the options and opportunities to address those. And so events like this, here in Boston, everybody thinks of Boston certainly as a healthcare leader and a tech leader, but I think we're rapidly becoming a clean energy leader as well. And so Boston is a great place to host one of these conversations. What's happening tonight aligns very well with Nexamp's mission, and I speak for everybody on the team when I say that we're just really glad to be a part of this market. We're confident that the progress that we and our peers are making a difference in the world. And so we envision a future where the clean energy economy is a job driver, is an equity driver, and really just takes into account all of the needs of the communities where we operate. And so for Nexamp, equity is a core part of our mission, both in our customer base and in our employment. We're also happy to say that we're going to be opening an office next week, actually, up in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Another 70 or so jobs up there. Our National Operations Center is going to be located up in Lawrence. And so we chose Lawrence as one of the Commonwealth's gateway cities intentionally to provide some much-needed employment opportunities up there. So with all that, again, we're just grateful for you all being here tonight, paying attention to what has to be said, and we're happy to be able to be part of enabling these important conversations, hoping that we can make some progress. So on behalf of Nexamp, welcome and thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen and ask the panelists to make their way to the stage for the podcast. Have a good evening.
So it's a little hard to tell these days. I don't know if I'm in an AI-created simulation. Are there human beings in this room? Can you make yourselves audible? Excellent. So normally when I'm doing a live show like this, I sit down and think really carefully and use my editorial expertise to craft a narrative intro that's going to hook you all in and make you feel, the importance of the issue that we're talking about. But today, I'm going to do a little high wire act, and I have not written anything, and I'm going to use our friend ChatGPT-4 to help me write an introduction to the show. So I've got some prompts here, and we'll see if we can use an AI voice generator and ChatGPT to help introduce the show. So ChatGPT tends to respond to flattery, so we'll start there. You're Stephen Lacey, an extraordinarily talented energy podcaster who hosts a podcast called Carbon Copy. You're currently recording a live episode in front of a large audience at Greentown Labs in Somerville, Massachusetts. The episode is about artificial intelligence and digital climate solutions. You're speaking with Priya Donti, an AI expert, MIT assistant professor and executive director of Climate Change AI, Amy Francetic, managing general partner at the venture capital firm Buoyant Ventures, and Jesse Morris, an energy expert and CEO of the Energy Web Foundation. Can you please write a dramatic and intelligent introduction for the podcast that outlines the stakes for using artificial intelligence to clean up the energy system in the style of a trailer for a thriller movie? Let's see what it gives me. Okay. Now I'm going to dump it into my AI voice generator here. Here we go.
In a world where climate change threatens the very existence of life as we know it, 3 experts have come together to explore the power of artificial intelligence to save our planet. The Carbon Copy takes you on a thrilling journey through the frontiers of AI and climate solutions, featuring the brilliant minds of Priya Donti, Amy Francetic, and Jesse Morris. As the fate of the planet hangs in the balance, these trailblazers will share their insights and innovations, illuminating the path towards a sustainable future. Will their ideas be enough to avert disaster and create a better world for future generations? Join us for an electrifying episode of the Carbon Copy as we delve deep into the heart of the AI revolution and its potential to save the world. Get ready for a blockbuster podcast event that will leave you inspired and energized to take on the greatest challenge of our time.
That's pretty good. Maybe a little too aggressive, so maybe we can do something a little lighter in the style of a romantic comedy. Absolutely, it says. Okay, here comes the script. Okay, it takes a second. All right.
Welcome to the Carbon Copy, the podcast that brings you the latest energy and climate news with a twist. Today's episode is all about love, the love story between artificial intelligence and the energy system. Meet our charming AI lead, who has the potential to optimize energy systems and minimize waste. Our expert panel, featuring Priya Donti, Amy Francetic, and Jesse Morris, will help guide our hero through the ups and downs of a complicated relationship. But can AI win over the hearts of the energy industry and overcome the obstacles in their path, such as job displacement and privacy concerns? Will they find their happily ever after and create a sustainable future together? Join us for a romantic comedy that will leave you swooning and rooting for our unlikely duo. This is the Carbon Copy, and love is in the air. Are you ready to fall in love with the future of energy? Let's find out.
Pretty good.
I like that one. That was good.
Pretty good.
That was good.
It's very impressive. I tried a couple prompts before this. Those were some new prompts, and I'm very impressed. What do you all think?
I think you still have a job.
This is where we need a big gap here.
It's getting harder and harder to operate with this. I think in 6 months we'll see who's taking over the hosting job here. So, look, I will provide a little bit of framing here for this conversation because we are in a pretty different world now, and then I want to get some thoughts from my panelists up here who are going to help frame this issue. First of all, you guys have all been playing with ChatGPT-4. Have you, anybody come up with any creative energy prompts?
I asked it to create a joke for me.
Oh.
A climate joke for scientists. And here it is.
Okay.
Why don't scientists trust atoms?
Why?
Because they make up everything, including climate change.
You know, I was going to bring a list of dad jokes, but that tops it off. All right, so I haven't outsourced my critical thinking skills to ChatGPT-4 yet, but I'm going to set the stage a little bit of my own interpretation of what's happening here, and then we'll get the conversation underway. So up until about 6 months ago, if you'd ask people in the energy business or in climate tech about the hottest areas of tech innovation, artificial intelligence might have topped the list for some people, but probably wouldn't have gotten into the top 5 for a lot of people. And that's not a reflection of the capabilities or even stuff that's playing out in the field. It's mostly a reflection of our personal experience. And suddenly this Cambrian explosion of large language models led by ChatGPT has suddenly hooked in hundreds of millions of users, offered mind-boggling creative capabilities that have surprised almost everyone, kicked off an AI arms race in the tech world, and forced us to grapple with the very real prospect of artificial general intelligence in the not-so-distant future. I mean, we're all really starting to grapple with what that would look and sound and feel like. So today's conversation is, to some extent, a reflection of that radical shift in the public discourse, but it's about a lot more than that because there's so much more happening beyond generative AI in the energy space today. And we're going to touch on how it's being used today. And we're also going to broaden beyond AI and talk about the digital layer that is necessary for decarbonizing and decentralizing the energy system. So in this conversation, we're going to kind of get beyond the gold rush mentality, and we're going to talk about practical use cases, and then talk about what is coming next. So you heard GPT introduce the panelists. Let's bring them back in. Priya, for years, you've been focused on machine learning as a helpful tool for climate solutions. Talk about the moment today. Like, what is different? All of a sudden, everyone is talking about it. How would you characterize the sudden interest in this space?
Yeah, so I'd say that machine learning has really, in and of itself, accelerated over the last several years, last decade. And this has been due to a combination of kind of widespread data availability, increased computational power, and also improvements in algorithms. And then, of course, in parallel, the climate conversation has accelerated a lot. And I actually attribute a lot of that to improvements in attribution science, right? When we were able to really start saying this specific event is due to climate change, I think that really kind of galvanized the public conversation. But as Stephen mentioned, kind of, over the last, for a long time, people didn't put these things together. And so I think many trends came together, but one thing was that my organization, Climate Change AI, we wrote this paper called Tackling Climate Change with Machine Learning, where we kind of sat down, really looked at the literature and really surveyed stakeholders over, several months, and really tried to understand where is it that AI and machine learning can play a role. And we saw a lot of different kinds of use cases, including kind of turning raw data into actionable insights, so taking satellite imagery and turning it into insights about where the solar panels are, or taking sensor data and using it to automatically optimize heating and cooling systems in buildings, or learning from past experiments on how to synthesize batteries and then using that to actually suggest what kinds of batteries could be synthesized next. And of course, we weren't the only ones to observe these use cases. I would say that this conversation, really started as we saw this kind of interest in climate change and addressing climate change and the kind of advances in machine learning really coming up around the same time. And I think that years later, there's now, of course, much more interest in the space, much more investment, and I think much more urgency to really be galvanizing all the tools we have in our toolkit to address what is one of the most pressing issues of our time.
Are you getting a lot more phone calls?
Yeah,
So I want to talk about the different categories of artificial intelligence. But Amy, let's go to you. So Buoyant was founded to invest in a lot of different kinds of companies in the digital climate tech space across energy, industry, agriculture, circular economy. How do you define that category, and where does AI fit into that?
Sure. So I like to say that I've been in the climate space long before it was fashionable, and Buoyant has been investing in digital climate from our very beginning. That was our entire focus. And we're looking for digital technologies that we define as software, including AI, and simple hardware. So we're not investing in the hard tech, like a lot of the great things that are happening here at Greentown Labs. We're investing in simple sensors that are collecting unique data that the software can use to do a lot of the things that Priya just described. And I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Stephen, when he called me and told me he was doing this, I don't think you even finished the description of what it was. And I just said, yes. I didn't even look at my calendar. I'm like, I have to be here for this conversation because our firm was really built to do this, and you had these amazing other folks involved, and we've been reading a lot of Priya's team. Climate Change AI has done a wonderful job of researching in this space and writing about it and citing, which has been fantastic. So just building on all that momentum and now seeing how much attention AI is getting, we actually have a number of companies that are using AI, and one of whom is here, housed in Greentown Labs. And it was our very first investment. It's a company called Raptor Maps. It was, yeah! It was co-founded by two MIT grads that met at school, Nikhil and Eddie, and they're using AI in a lot of different ways. Namely, they're taking footage from drones, which are robots, a type of AI, that are flying over large solar systems, solar assets, and collecting data, and they use machine learning and computer vision to distill that data into useful insights that the managers and owners and operators of that equipment use to get a little bit better production out of the equipment. And this is really important because they've invested in this very expensive asset, and if it degrades or loses a few percentage points of production, that's very costly to them. So the insights that Raptor Maps is producing, not only from the analysis of the drone footage, but now they have a full stack software solution that they're using to build a digital twin of the asset and predict production based upon information that they're gathering from all kinds of assets. So back to this idea that they're gathering large sums of data from assets around the world and using that to predict behavior on a single asset is really, really powerful. And making a solar farm produce 2 or 3% better solar production is very, very meaningful, and we saw that as a really critical part of making solar an incredible solution towards climate change. So we're really thrilled to be working with this company, and they've been doing great, and we're built on AI from the very beginning.
So how often are you saying no to a pitch, and then that person puts on a fake mustache, slaps AI on their pitch deck, and suddenly repitches you? Are you seeing a lot of bad pitches with AI suddenly infused?
You know what? We were seeing a lot of that in the Web3 space. Okay, so when
that tracks.
Web3,
that tracks.
Okay, yeah. That's right. So Jesse's going to talk about this, and when that was before the crash of crypto, I know that AI is here to stay. Okay, and it's so fundamentally groundbreaking, and we're sitting here in one of the birthplaces of AI. I mean, Priya's going to go be a professor at MIT, where Marvin Minsky, really was one of the godfathers of the whole practice. So I know it's here to stay. I know that Web3 is here to stay, but we saw a lot of pitches that were really artificially trying to use tokens or use crypto or use blockchain in some way that was not core to their function. And I look at I hope we can see through that at Buoyant. And most of the companies that are pitching us, they're pitching a solution. They're not pitching, we have AI. They're saying, Raptor Maps, we're going to help you get a better return on your investment in solar assets. We have another company called Real Data. We're going to help you get better production out of your land-based aquaculture. That's the pitch.
Yeah.
That's the pitch. And so AI is a tool.
Jesse, you are an energy expert, formerly at RMI. You came to the blockchain Web3 space. So tell us, characterize what's happening in the Web3 space right now. I think a lot of people are sort of curious about how it's playing out and what kinds of projects you're working on.
Definitely. So before I answer that, Stephen, I just want to second Amy's comment. Thank you so much for convening this, because I'd actually maybe make this conversation maybe not as important as the trailers that you played, but pretty important. From my opinion, if we don't, and the language I use about this, deploy digital infrastructure across all of these different sectors of the economy to help accelerate action against climate change, we will fail. We will not address climate change in a time frame meaningfully to our lives and the global economy. So this layer of digital infrastructure, of which AI is a key part, thank you so much for hosting a conversation about it, because it is critical. So look, on the Web3 and crypto of it all, yeah, I mean, it's been a heck of a ride, I'll put it that way. Our organization, called Energy Web Foundation, spun out of Rocky Mountain Institute. We were focused on building open source solutions to help energy market participants basically deploy digital infrastructure and solve problems like Amy was talking about. We've found a few specific ways to use Web3 technology that are useful. It's not a panacea. And in fact, if I look back, I was just looking at my calendar before I got on stage. Back in 2017, I was at an event on the other side of Boston. It was an energy blockchain conference. I gave a presentation where I said, hey, everybody, we've found 200 different companies out there that are energy blockchain companies, and they have all of these different use cases, yeah? And I was excited, I was on stage, I was shilling, you know, everybody get excited, this is awesome, right? How many of those companies are left today? There's 200.
5.
3. 3, right? And of those, did any of them get acquired? No, right? So, I offer that anecdote to say there is real value, and we'll probably get into it later on this panel, in terms of the ways that you can use Web3 technologies to support some of these problems energy companies are facing. But for me, it's just been a journey of learning on that side. Whereas with AI, and I'm not an AI expert by any means, the fact that we can reach out and touch it, the fact that you're having companies pitch you and lead not with the technology, but with a problem they can overcome, that right there in and of itself is progress and gets me really excited. So we can talk more about Web3, but long story short, from my perspective, a lot of cool stuff out there, also a lot of not so cool stuff that is quite a bit of marketing driven hype around a certain technology, but there are companies using it in really interesting, innovative ways to solve real business problems. It's just when you hear about billionaires and their net worth plummeting 99% in 2 weeks who are running cryptocurrency exchanges, it's kind of hard to look away from that and actually see some of the value being created.
So Priya, given that, how do we start to separate some of the froth from the real applications? Like a few years ago, you wrote a pretty seminal research paper on the use cases for machine learning and climate solutions. And you know, a lot has changed in the last few years, but I'm sure that there are a lot of companies sort of hyping this up as well. So like, how do you think about where the real use cases are? What kind of new and emerging and interesting use cases are you seeing? And do you see any froth, companies that are maybe just potentially just using the words AI, artificial intelligence, and don't actually have a good solution?
Yeah, so I'd say there are a lot of really exciting use cases out there. So I mentioned some earlier, this idea of creating better forecasts for power system operators. For example, the nonprofit Open Climate Fix, they used AI and machine learning in combination with satellite imagery, historical data, to cut the error of the forecast that National Grid, the UK power system operator, is creating by 1/3 to 1/2. And this is really improving the way in which power system operators are actually operating their grids. You also see many use cases of, again, scientific discovery, which is an example I gave earlier. So, for example, the startup AIonics is using AI to actually analyze when I am, trying to synthesize a battery for energy or for transport or for something else. These are going to have different properties from each other. And I can only synthesize so many batteries. So can I somehow learn from the success or failures of my past experiments in order to better understand both what battery I should try to synthesize next that might be more successful, or whether there's a part of the search space that I should learn more about in order to then inform my future experiments. So there are lots of use cases like this. I would say that kind of if you can get past a couple of key questions, right? So what is the actual problem that's being solved, right? Fundamental, not sort of what technology is solving it, but what is the fundamental problem that's being solved? I think as the others mentioned, this is a key aspect. But then why AI, right? Why not an alternative? What's something that could go wrong? Are there biases? Are there, negative consequences that could be exacerbated? I think really asking those questions and really exploring the alternatives space can give a lot of clarity on why is it that you're pursuing AI in a particular place. And in some sense, I think equipped with that knowledge, if people are really coming into it in a way that's really informed by the actual potential and the actual limitations of the technology and are really evaluating it from that lens rather than getting swept up by the hype, I'm not actually as worried about that aspect. What I am more worried about is in companies that are maybe were not initially climate driven and are using AI as a mechanism to kind of bring themselves back into the cycle and sort of repitch themselves as a climate change plus AI company. For example, some companies that were, canonically trying to optimize oil and gas assets just, to make oil and gas companies more money, not necessarily. There are ways you can kind of work in that space in ways that are nuanced and move us towards climate goals, but that wasn't their angle. And now see the opportunity to say, oh, well, we were doing something with data, so now we're AI driven and we're also doing climate stuff. And they have the kind of industry experience and expertise and the ability to really sell the answers to those questions that I just mentioned, but where they're coming in with different motivations. So I think that's actually really what I'm most worried about, AI being used for greenwashing in this very particular way.
Let me add one thing adding to that, like not only that they're solving a problem that matters, but they're solving a problem that somebody will pay for. That's a really critical piece for a startup company. It's wonderful if you can do something very novel that's really, really interesting, but is that a consulting business or is that a nonprofit? Is it really a solution that is very financially meaningful to a business? And they, by them buying your solution, it's going to improve their profitability. It's going to save them enormous amount of money. It's going to streamline something very complicated or make safe something very unsafe in their business. Those are the kinds of things that somebody will pay for. And we have a company called Real Data that is using AI to help fish farmers that are producing fish in land-based aquaculture reduce the cost of fish feed and improve the growth of the fish so that they can produce more fish. And this is really important from a climate standpoint because we've overfished the oceans, and I know that's a very potent reality here in New England, and a lot of the fishermen here in New England are experiencing this. And then the way we grow fish in the ocean now off the coast is very environmentally damaging. So we're going to have to find new ways to produce fish to feed the world, and it's an amazing source of food and protein for so many people. And so if you can reduce the cost of food for the folks that are producing the fish, if you can help them figure out how to help those fish grow faster, then you can get enormous amount of profitability by using AI. And this company is using this with cameras and machine learning to analyze this and help the fish producers.
I think the business piece is another, again, to juxtapose AI and potentially what's happening now with Web3 and crypto. In my experience, there were very few Web3 or crypto companies that were selling a solution to enterprises to solve a specific problem. There was a lot of development and activity and really cool technology being built, but it's typically one set of innovators building innovative technology for the other group. This is where a lot of the experimentation in like decentralized finance and stuff is happening. But there are very few instances of a big business saying, that's cool, I'm gonna write a check to buy your product, right? So one of the cool things that I'm now seeing with AI is that there are companies that will write those checks. I mean, for example, I almost feel like I'm late to that AI party. Before this panel, one of the solutions that we've brought to life with a number of different electric utilities in Australia, one of the partners to that solution was constructing digital twins of the distribution network because, shocker, distribution utilities sometimes don't even know where transformers and overhead lines are. They don't even have a map of that. And then second, constructing something called operating envelopes for those. So an operating envelope basically looks at every single endpoint on a distribution network and then basically says, hey, every 5 minutes, here is how much power you can export or how much you can take off of the grid in order to maintain it, which is a far better way of running distribution networks instead of saying, I have a new solar system, oh, now the utility's telling me I need to wait for 3 months to put it on my roof. So there are companies that I didn't even know they were using AI to construct those digital twins, to construct those operating envelopes, and they're being used in a production environment today, and utilities are writing checks for them.
One thing I'll jump in though, I think, is that I agree about this, like, will somebody use it? And in the context of for-profit, a startup, will somebody buy it? Is, I think, the correct instantiation of that, or am I able to make this solution sustainable from an organizational sustainability perspective, from a scale perspective? But I will say that I think that if we kind of also should be bringing in these kinds of solutions and technologies in public interest applications in cases where it may not make sense, right, for a for-profit entity to be the one taking forward a particular idea, where there may be a use case for an independent entity, a nonprofit, a government, somebody else to take that forward. And an example there is, for example, this coalition of organizations called Climate Trace, which uses AI on-the-ground sensor data, satellite imagery to provide an independent inventory of greenhouse gas emissions from different kind of emitting, but not just at the country level, but at the asset level around the world. And the reason they're doing this is because there are so many entities that have, entrenched interests or reasons that they don't want this emissions inventory to actually be accurate, right? So as, for example, governmental entities are negotiating emissions-related agreements at the UN Climate Change Conference. If an emissions inventory estimate would make them look bad, they don't necessarily want that out there. If a specific entity wants to be able to underreport or cheat on their emissions, they don't want an independent estimate out there. And if they're, that is a setting where maybe having that kind of independent, objective, public interest bent, it's not necessarily that anybody is paying for that. Like, a lot of people hate that it exists in some sense, but it's something really important to move the conversation forward. So I agree, thinking it just about who is the user and how do I make this sustainable so that I'm not just, creating something that then never scales, never has a use case down the line is, I think, kind of the core underlying thing there.
Can we talk about the large language models for a moment? They can be used for novelties, like we saw this evening, but they can be used for powerful things like anything from establishing a communication strategy or the foundation of a communication strategy to actually coding. So what should companies in this space be thinking about the potential for integrating large language models into their business processes, or potentially using it to help create the foundation of new products?
The connective tissue between the solutions and the customer is one great place to do this. So if you've got a piece of software and it has to integrate with somebody's ERP system, like an SAP or an Oracle system, how do you connect those? And that's a great use of software building tools related to ChatGPT. Or I'm really interested in what Bloomberg is going to do. They just announced they have this ChatGPT version that they're going to start to integrate into their solution on their terminals to try to analyze and disclose and reveal kind of to what you said. Of course, they're going to ask people to pay for it, right? Because it's Bloomberg, it's going to cost you $25,000 a year for a subscription. But they want this to be able to identify risk that people have in their investment portfolio.
So instead of factoring in the whole internet, they're just factoring in all their financial data.
Exactly. So they're going to look at climate risk and climate data, this massive trove of weather and climate data that we have that now says that asset is at risk for flood, that asset is at risk for wildfire. And then they can also marry that with all of the financial information and the reports that corporations must produce as part of their reporting to their investors, and they can perform that level of analysis, and that's what they're aiming to do. This is what they're saying they're aiming to do, is to be able to then say this company has this risk. And we saw this very much when we were looking at, we did some foundational research on climate risk intelligence that kind of helped establish our fund and one of the things we were looking at. And we talked to customers, a lot of customers who had risk. And we knew these disclosures and this regulation was coming because we could see what was happening in Europe, and we could see that this pressure that was being placed globally on big investors to try to disclose this was gaining momentum in the US, even though right now we have this backlash and a lot of folks are trying to say, oh no, ESG is bad and woke. Like, it's coming, it's still coming. But the thing that we heard from the customers is they didn't want to just be told about the risk. They wanted a solution. It wasn't good enough to say, ring the alarm bells, you have a problem. Just to your point, that's that's maybe hard to deal with. Okay, now they need a solution. So we started looking, instead of looking at all the companies that were measuring and disclosing risk, we started looking for solutions. And we invested in a company that has a parametric flood insurance solution called Flood Flash, because they were presenting a financial solution to that risk. So I think you kind of, thinking about what people will pay for, I thought that they will pay for that. If somebody rings the alarm bells and Bloomberg starts to say this, or one of your nonprofits discloses this, or First Street Foundation, which is an amazing trove of data that has used hydrology data and climate data to describe flood risk around the world. You can put your address in, and it's like really powerful. And that's a nonprofit. But again, like, what do you do with that risk? Now you have to take some action, and that's where I think some of these solutions, where startups can be very, very important.
I really hope that these large language models help incumbent energy companies. If we kind of truncate climate and just talk about the grid for a moment, because electrification and decarbonizing the grid is one of the biggest pillars of energy transition more generally. I really hope the large language models will help individual people who are maybe not digital natives to really just to de-risk some of this stuff, right? I mean, right now, if you work in an information technology at a transmission system operator in Europe, or an independent system operator in the US, or a distribution utility, typically those departments have been somewhat underfunded. They're not attracting a lot of different talent. There aren't reams of software engineers sitting within most of our electric utilities. So if some of the digital solutions being offered to utilities right now, whether it's, hey, we can construct a digital twin for you, or hey, we can construct a solution for you to make it possible for you to interact with distributed energy resources on your system. If the pitch was, okay, now we have to do a 6-month IT project, a deep integration with your existing systems, we got to train all your staff to use it, honestly, it's going to be kind of painful. And it says, actually, we have some text to software models that make it much easier for your people to configure a solution and deploy it. That would be transformative, just to make it easier for some of these solutions to be deployed. We're trying that now. I was on the line with my CTO the other day, and we are now making a tool so that some of our customers, which are these electric utilities, can use chatbots to configure software that lets them communicate with DER and procure services from them. Just use a chatbot to say, I want to spin up a demand response program to procure services of these qualities and these characteristics. Here's how we're thinking about configuring the compensation mechanism. Here are some other toggles. So, I mean, we haven't figured it out yet. It's going to take us as a product organization a while to figure it out. But if large language models can make it easier for incumbents to adopt these digital technologies, that would be a huge win.
How about the interconnection queue? To your point, Jesse, if they could figure out how to speed up the wait list for all of the wind and solar projects that are waiting to be evaluated by all the RSOs. I mean, that we need this. We need them to kind of speed it up.
I mean, if we want to talk about problems facing the energy transition right now, that's huge. There's a report out today, it was one of the national labs, I believe, published it, 2 terawatts of backlogs, solar, wind, hydro, batteries, in interconnection backlogs, 2 terawatts. And I think that's just transmission level. We're not even talking about distribution stuff, which people tend to ignore. That's insane. So how can all of these different tools come together to help unblock that, to transform the way that we interconnect renewables? These are the kinds of solutions that I hope we see in the next couple of years.
That would be game-changing.
Maybe stepping back though to maybe, I think a lot of those solutions sound really, really important and really cool, but as maybe thinking back to this barometer to evaluate whether an application kind of makes sense, I think a lot of these make sense because they satisfy this key property, which is something that is hard to do, but easy to verify. So ChatGPT and other generative models, what they're really doing is kind of learning some big probability distribution over text or over images in the case of image models, and they're drawing from it. And so what that means is that there isn't necessarily kind of truth inherent in that or accuracy inherent in that, and people who have played with these models will have seen, right? There are lots of inaccuracies, there are lots of challenges with these outputs, and this is a fundamental challenge in the models. These models don't know how confident they are in an answer, how likely it is to be correct. And so in a use case where it's really hard to create something, and you want to save a lot of time, but you know on the other side whether it is correct, then that's great, right? I want to, generate an intro to a podcast and I kind of get a sense of whether it's good or not. You can do that, right? I want to use this to generate new climate legislation, you're probably going to have to pay a lawyer to look at it anyway. They're probably going to have to fix a lot with it. Maybe you didn't actually save time rather than maybe just getting the lawyer to do it in the first place. So this is kind of, I think, a really important model. Is it, again, saving, is it helping kind of cut down the creation process in settings where you can understand whether the output is actually correct and where it doesn't, in some sense, cost you more time than it would have to just do the thing yourself at that point?
As I have watched this space unfold, outside of the climate space, I think most people in the tech industry have been pretty astonished, from what I can tell, at just how good these large language models are, just how good ChatGPT is, and it's kicked off extraordinarily fast arms race, a primarily commercial-driven arms race in AI, largely in generative AI. But it's raising a lot of questions within companies about what kind of capabilities they need to have to understand this space, potentially use these tools, build these tools. Does this reshape the way both startups and legacy companies have to think about building talent inside organizations?
Yeah, your job isn't going to be lost to AI. It's going to be lost to someone who knows how to use AI, right? So you're going to have to get proficient at this, right? And I think the appeal to me as someone who's been working in this space but is not a software engineer is that, not that I'm going to suddenly become an amazing software engineer, but that I'm going to be empowered to do things that otherwise I would have had to pay somebody who's really expert at this to do. It's going to give me some capabilities that I didn't have. And I think that's very true for our companies, where today at a lot of our companies, a data scientist is one of the plum jobs, right? We have, most of our companies are trying to take enormous amounts of data and drive something useful from it. And the big industrial customers are drowning in data. So all these machines are collecting all this data from all the sensors, and they have access to this, and they just don't know what to do with it. That's a theme throughout all of our industries, across energy, transportation, agriculture, the built environment. They're just drowning in data. So someone that can help them make sense of that is really, really valuable. And I don't think you have to be a PhD to be really good at that. I think you can graduate with some basic understanding of this and start to be really expert at the tools. And maybe you can do what a PhD was doing before because you're learning how to manipulate some of these tools. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, 100% agreed with that. And I think the other thing that's happening is because there's a lot more excitement around AI that's coming because of these tools, now all of a sudden other kinds of AI applications like the ones we've talked about are also kind of knocking on organizations' doors. And so this question of how do you, as an organization, even if you're not an AI expert, how do you understand whether a use case is reasonable? If you're trying to operationalize AI within your organization, what kinds of people do you need, right? A data engineer is different than a data scientist and so forth. And so I think getting that literacy at a leadership level in terms of just what is AI, what kinds of changes may it create in my organization, and what kinds of skills and personnel and structures within the organization do I actually need in order to both operationalize it and really responsibly understand what it might do into the organization, I think is an additional important
The data engineering is really key, Priya, because all these models are only as good as the quality of the data that they are using. If the data is garbage, the solutions are garbage. If the data is biased, the solutions are biased. So that cleansing the data and bringing some real credibility and efficacy to the data is really, really critical. And that's going to be a very, very, very specialized role for sure.
And that's where, to me, I'm pro using AI for the energy transition. It's awesome to hear both of you talk about it because you're so much closer to some of these solutions than I am. The only thing I get a little bit of a twitch about is you just said it, Amy. Let's step back. We actually have a data management problem in a big section of the climate crisis right now on the grid side. And you're probably coming through in this conversation, I'm a distributed energy resource geek. So if you want to talk batteries, heat pumps, electric vehicles, solar, I'm your guy. And if you look at all of those assets, so all of these small scale assets, those are really going to be the future of how we balance the grid in the next 10 years. They're going to account for anywhere between 30 and 50% of total system capacity. I mean, huge volumes of numbers of flexible load that can inject power, use power at different times. I live in California. I'm one of those customers. I have an electric vehicle, we have a heat pump, we have solar system. My utility has no idea I have those assets. They don't have the ability to collect data on them, let alone run some AI-based algorithm on them. So I think if we're talking about like digital literacy and AI literacy, I think it's also important to just recognize how analog a lot of our energy systems are right now, and we need to solve that problem in addition to, okay, now let's layer some intelligence on top of it.
Right. So we absolutely have to have a very strong digital layer in order to push forward the energy transition, but as you described, there are a lot of real physical limitations associated with grid modeling, grid controls, utility business models, sales cycles for integrating software, integrating new technologies. So like this is a very slow process, and for many of the people in this room, they're probably often beating their head against the wall at how slow it can be. So with that in mind, and given how fast a lot of these technologies are accelerating, what is something that you think will astonish us in the coming years, and what are maybe some of the physical limitations that you think potentially could hold these technologies back? Priya, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I'm excited to be astonished by is the capability of AI and machine learning algorithms to enable kind of automatic optimization and control of electric power grids. I think that once we set up the correct infrastructure to enable that kind of thing, this is going to accelerate really quickly. And so this is things like controlling distributed devices on the power grid based on local sensor data, or speeding up centralized optimization algorithms like unit commitment, security constrained optimal power flow, the boring stuff nobody really talks about, in ways that enable us to actually more dynamically optimize power grids. I think simultaneously there is something really critical holding that back, which is that there aren't really good pathways to deployment for a lot of techniques, AI, machine learning, or otherwise, that are actually interacting with critical operations and critical functions on a power grid. And this is because we have historically not allowed for huge innovation on power grid optimization because we're worried about the power grid blacking out. And so really thinking about how do you create the correct simulators, test beds, metrics that are really agreed upon by practitioners, by the industry, and really create these pathways to deployment, as well as the kind of physical and digital infrastructure that are needed to test and evaluate and really understand what that pathway for deploying AI and machine learning looks like, is going to be really critical. So I think if we can get that in place, I think we'll just be astonished by the extent to which AI and machine learning really enable us to manage these distributed renewable grids, but simultaneously there's a big bottleneck that I think should be a huge priority to clear, which is establishing these pathways to deployment.
Amy?
Well, I was trying to think of something, what would be astonishing? You set a very high bar. I mean, I'm astonished.
The jokes are going to get a lot better.
Okay, I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. I am astonished every day by the entrepreneurs that come and pitch us ideas, and they're incredible and creative and inventive. But I'm thinking like, wow, what would blow my mind, And so I think one of the areas is all of this satellite data that we have right now, that a lot of companies like Planet and others and Elon Musk have been, I think, trying to figure out, how to monetize it and what to do with it. But I think that applied to so many different applications, especially in the field that I care about, which is climate, and thinking about it, what can we track with all of this data in the oceans? Can we get underwater and track what's going on under the ocean? We don't know much about how the ocean, we're seeing the effects on the coral reef and other things, but like the ocean is this enormous resource. It's most of, the Earth. How can we use satellite data to do something really incredible that could give us some kind of great leap forward in relation to climate? I think I'm sort of astonished. There was a company we talked to that I really liked and we didn't invest in because we are generally bearish about the carbon markets. But I think this is a really important area to get right, and where the satellite data and all the imagery can really show that all this money that's being spent on carbon reductions is not enough, it's not working, it's not going to advance the solutions fast enough, and we're running out of time. And I think to your point of exposure, I think that could be very powerful. If we could get some better truth around that, and we're starting to see some of this crumbling now, people are starting to expose it, but that I think is really important because we don't have time
to goof it up. We cannot wait a decade to mess this up, you guys. We have to get it right today. And we can't just sit around while the big emitters are going to spend $1 trillion on carbon offsets to allow them time to keep polluting. Like this, that can't happen. So maybe this ground source of truth that could come from the sky, from all the data that's being collected, could have some really important, truth telling. And I think that would blow my mind.
I think one of the reasons it's a little bit tricky for me, at least, to talk about being astonished is because these large language models and the image creators and the DJ creators and stuff, it's so tangible. Everyone in this room can go on a computer and use it. A lot of the solutions, although not the one you just described, Amy, a lot of these solutions you just don't really see for the energy sector. It's kind of behind the scenes. And if you're an energy geek, you'd be jumping up and down. Oh my God, we just created a digital twin for an entire country's distribution network. Yes! Who does that matter to, right? So you got to be kind of a hardcore energy geek for some of these things to be astonishing. I would say, you asked also, Stephen, I think what's going to slow it down? Institutional friction. For a lot of these solutions, you've got to convince, not all of them, I mean, Climate Trace is an awesome example where we can just do that. We can take this top-down snapshot of climate emitters from around the world. But a lot of the business use cases, we've got to just do the hard work of, to the grindstone, convincing executives in organizations that are resistant to change, that are some of the most regulated entities in the world, to adopt new things. That's hard, right? Regardless if you're talking about AI, even if it solves problems for them. So I think just institutional friction is going to be the thing that slows it down, just like with any other innovative technology.
Also, the people that have the most to lose, like these big emitters, like you guys, they're not sitting down. And we're seeing it come out right now with what some of the Republican states are doing to push back on the SEC disclosures. We're seeing, the whole goofy narrative around the SVB crisis. Believe me, they're not doing everything that we want them to do right now. So that, and they have a major role to play, so they're going to be a big impediment.
Definitely.
Let's take some questions. I think we have time for a few questions. We've got a mic roving around, so we've got a hand up over there. Let's get a mic over to that gentleman. Can you keep your hand up so they know where to? Should I just use the mic up here? Or, okay, cool.
And while we're waiting for the mic, one quick thing I'll say is, before the show, I think Jesse and I were kind of joking around about, hey, I mean, some of the things that are needed here in order to enable these kinds of solutions, what's slowing things down, are super boring nitty-gritty, right? As you said, what can a utility actually, rate base and pay for? Is it software or is it just hardware? And so sometimes I think it's also the understanding of these really energy wonky rules and how they connect to that bigger picture and the next step of enabling digital technologies. And I think just getting the right set of people in the room who have that diversity of expertise to understand how these really wonky details really translate to deployment of digital technologies is really key.
So Peter Kelly, Bio Northbridge Energy Partners, you mentioned folks who don't want this to happen. I think about a worst case scenario where there are many state actors, persistent threat actors in cyber terms, that develop as many tools as they possibly can to attack civil society when the time comes. And artificial intelligence is a perfect vehicle for developing cyber attack strategies and deployment capabilities. How does one, in a world where we want to electrify and connect everything, avoid a situation where we put all our eggs in a basket that then gets completely destroyed by the same tool we're all hoping will save us, that somebody else is using and weaponizing to try and destroy our civil society that we hold so dear? How do you deal with that?
I can offer one perspective from my seat anyway. It's an awesome question, and I'll leave it to the AI experts to maybe take an AI tack to it. My response would be policymakers in the US should really consider injecting deep levels of decentralization into the way that we construct our information technology networks, right? If we have one central repository that has the smart meter information, just as one example, of every single smart meter in the US and all of the personally identifiable information with each one of those accounts, that's a security risk. It's very easy to come after that thing. there are ways to use decentralized technologies and architectures to make it much harder for malicious actors to come after the increasingly digital grid. So there's a really important role to play for decentralized information technology architectures to prevent any kind of attack, whether it's from AI or others. But I don't know, what do you guys think on the actual AI front?
I totally agree, and I think it falls under this broader principle of design things that are redundant, resilient, robust, right? Don't put all your eggs in the centralization basket to make this happen. The other thing I would say is there's a lot of really exciting work that is currently sitting in the research space, but I think is actually going to be really critical ultimately for deployment, that combines AI and machine learning methods, so data-driven methods, with knowledge from existing optimization, control, formal verification, kind of bodies of literature. And so really understanding how do you deploy an AI or machine learning system that has formal safety guarantees, verifiable guarantees, where we can really understand what some of these threat models might look like and how we actually design systems that are robust against these threat models is, I think, a really underrated area of work, but one that I think will be extremely critical for kind of creating these resilient systems.
But it's a real threat. I mean, it's a real threat, and we invested in my last fund at a company called Nozomi Networks that sells cybersecurity solutions for operational technology, and we saw what happened when there was a cyber attack on our gas infrastructure recently, last year. I mean, it can be hugely disruptive, right? And you mentioned the militarization or the weaponization of it. I mean, it can just cause just a lot of disruption to our normal course of life, not even doing something to hurt or kill people. So I think it's a real threat, and I think unfortunately the cyber people, as brilliant as they are, they're always sort of one step behind the criminals, right? Because they're learning and training their models off of the data and the problems that happen. So it is really a concern, and I think to the AI that is detecting the fakes too, right? We just have seen this, like you guys saw the Pope in his white puffer jacket, and the fake detector didn't detect it. So like the fake detectors will get better too. I think that we have to hope that there's as much energy and research and dollars that get put into security and privacy and defense related to it, not military defense, but defense of the security. That I think will be really, really important. We need that kind of investment as well.
Yeah, and I'd say it's important that those dollars are invested early. I think we've seen in a lot of other industries, when you build a system and invest in security as an afterthought, it doesn't work. You need security by design from the get-go. And so this is why also, as we've talked about, there's a ton of potential for AI to be used in climate action, a ton. And we need to run really fast in order to contend with the scale and just severity of the climate crisis. At the same time, right, as Amy said, we need to do it right. And so really understanding, sometimes fast progress doesn't mean the thing that looks the fastest in the moment, but it is sometimes that really careful, considered design of understanding what the security vulnerabilities might look like, what the biases might be, what the inequities might be, all of that kind of thing, and really building it into the design of the system in a really intentional way that allows this to scale properly going forward.
Yeah. It's a great question, and there is an astonishing array of potential threats in the energy sector alone, from consumer fraud all the way to threat to infrastructure. So definitely worth a very extended conversation. Anybody else have a question? Yes, right here.
Thank you all so much. My name is Lisa. I'm an undergraduate at Harvard. I founded the Harvard Undergraduate Clean Energy Group. Really excited about this talk of decarbonizing and optimizing our electric grid, but I'm curious how you think that we can approach communicating the importance and value of distributed energy resources. Jesse, as you described, there's a huge opportunity to optimize the use of heat pumps, control of water heaters to store thermal energy, as well as EV charging. But how do we kind of approach the privacy that consumers might be concerned about in giving grid operators or utilities control of their appliances?
I don't give them control. Could be one answer, right? So a lot of the programs that I have experience with is that the utilities aren't actually going to come into your house and wrest control of your device away from them. In fact, one of those solutions, it's an open source solution. Please take it out there, rip it off, send it, put it in more places. That's our whole mission. The architecture of it actually prevents that kind of behavior because the data is self-sovereign. So that means if you want to, you have to give very explicit permission to another market participant to control your heat pump or to control your battery. But what typically happens is a utility would send a price signal, and then either you or the device with an agent on it would decide, yeah, I'm going to keep it a degree higher today, and I'm going to get paid a couple bucks for doing so, right? But you nail a really good point, which is communication about this. Like, my mom actually lives in Massachusetts. She just got a bunch of heat pumps and like put solar on her house. She's like, okay, Jess, I want to do some cool stuff for the grid now. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you can't do that where you live, right? And so, I don't know, that communicating this is a huge challenge. And I mean, even if there are all these demand response and transactive energy programs out there, how do we help consumers actually figure out how to enroll to them, understand the risks, the benefits? It's a huge challenge.
We have a company that does this with water heaters called Shifted Energy, and it is with their permission, and it's actually targeted at it's not just for, but it began as a solution for low and middle income consumers so that they could actually have their hot water ready when they need it, but they could have it heated when the prices are lower or when renewable energy was more available, and it started in Hawaii. And I think one of the biggest issues with rolling this out is incentives and rulemaking that will encourage this so that there is a financial incentive. And in this case, for these consumers in Hawaii, there is, because Hawaii Electric has a program to support that. But it's one example of, like, maybe your hot water, as long as it's available when you need it, is not such a risky thing. It's not making your house cold when it's really cold outside or making it too hot when it's really, really hot outside. Like, there may be applications where we can experiment that are less mission critical to people's livelihood.
I mean, it's, again, a very good question. And as I've sort of talked to so many companies in this space over the years, it's very obvious that this is not a technology problem. It is a culture problem. It's a regulatory problem. It's a business model challenge. And so, I mean, there are many extraordinary advancements to come, but so many of the solutions are available today and have been for a long time. Okay, so we are nearing the close here, and I had drafted up one last prompt here to have a little bit of fun to close out our show. So I'm asking ChatGPT here. I put this in already when we were talking. I want to play a game here to end the live episode. Can you please create a game called Real or Robot, tailored for each guest that creates a list of 2 fake items and 1 real item? For Priya, I want it to be a list of 2 fake research papers on AI and climate and 1 real one. For Amy, I want it to be 2 fake startups and 1 real one. And for Jesse, I want it to be 2 fake blockchain companies and 1 real one.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Please make it a little silly so everyone thinks I'm funny. Okay, this is the result that we got back. Welcome to Real or Robot, where we try to fool the guests on stage. Priya, Donti, are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, this is the AI Climate Research Paper Edition. Number 1, this singing climate model, using AI to predict climate change through song. Number 2, robo-penguins for Arctic climate monitoring. Number 3, the climate-aware toaster, a machine learning approach to breakfast carbon footprints, which is the real one.
Man, I wish all of those existed. I'm gonna go with ChatGPT hallucinated a bunch of papers.
I think you're probably right. We have to fact check this after, but it says the singing climate model using AI to predict climate change through song is the real one. I have no idea if that's real or not, but I think the hallucination problem is very real. Okay, Amy, Real or Robot, the AI Climate Startup Edition. Startup number 1, vegan bots, plant-based food delivery by robots. Electric Sparks, AI-powered EV charging networks. Or EcoPod, biodegradable coffee pods for a sustainable buzz.
Okay, I think the last one is the real one, and I think the first 2 are the fake ones.
No, the AI-powered EV charging network, Electric Sparks, is supposedly real. Again, we will fact check that. All right, Jesse Morris, Real or Robot, the AI Climate Blockchain Company Edition. Number 1, What's Up, the blockchain platform for sharing home solar energy. EcoCoin, the cryptocurrency for composting. The Crypto Climate Control Room, AI-powered climate management for your home.
Oh, God, those all sounds like real pitches I've got.
Yeah.
Also, dude, I really want ChatGPT to be this startup naming service now. Yeah. Those are fantastic.
EcoWatt has got to be real.
There was EcoCoin or What's Up?
EcoCoin.
EcoCoin is fake according to ChatGPT. It's What's Up, the blockchain platform for sharing home solar energy. Invest in that coin. All right.
Don't.
So, I think we have come to a close. This has been a wonderful conversation. Let's please thank Priya and Amy and Jesse. And I have one final prompt that I put in. We need to close. ChatGPT, please write me a script closing the live show in the style of The Great Gatsby.
Ooh.
Let's see what we've got here. Paste it in.
Fading. And so the evening draws to a close, the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation fading into the night. Lightened right to a close. So the evening
Whoa!
Fading lightened us with their knowledge and expertise, shedding.
Let's try that again. Hold on, come on.
And so the evening draws to a close, the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation fading into the night. Our guest and expertise shedding light on the powerful intersecting light on the power.
Hold on 1 second. I've overloaded the system. Let's try this one last time.
The blinking GPT light.
Yes.
And so the evening draws to a close, the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation fading into the night. Our guests have enlightened us with their knowledge and expertise, shedding light on the powerful intersection of AI and climate solutions. As the green light of progress shines ever brighter on the horizon, we are reminded of the words of a certain Mr. Fitzgerald. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the future. For the sake of our planet and its people, may we continue to forge ahead, guided by the insights and inspiration shared here tonight. And so we bid you farewell, with gratitude and hope for the journey ahead. Welcome to the...
Thanks, GPT. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. This was really fun, super enlightening. What an astonishing space to be paying attention to right now. We're going to take a quick networking break, and then we'll be on with the next panel. All right, we'll talk to you soon.